What would you do if your dog barked precisely at 3 a.m. every night, without fail? A terrifying secret hidden within the walls that seemed the safest. This is the true story of a family. At first, everyone thought it was just a minor detail, an action that seemed like a random occurrence. Every night, right at 3 a.m., Bruno, the loyal golden retriever of the Scott family, would bark. Not too loudly, but clearly. And the strange thing was, he only barked at that exact time. No earlier, no later. The Scott family had just moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood after many years in the city. The new house, a 2-story white wood house with a curved porch, brought a sense of peace as if completely separated from the hustle and bustle outside. They thought this would be the perfect place to raise their little daughter Emma, who had just turned 6. Bruno, the dog they had raised since Emma was just learning to walk, was an inseparable part of the family. He was obedient and calm, never barked unnecessarily, and had never caused trouble. That's why, when he suddenly started growling and barking toward the dark hallway on the ground floor every night, it made Julia, the mother, feel uneasy. At first, Mark, the husband, laughed it off. "It's probably just a stray cat or a squirrel running on the roof, honey." Julia tried to believe that. But just a few days later, everything started to change. Bruno wasn't just barking anymore. He would also stand up, his face tense, eyes fixed on the dark corner beneath the stairs. There was nothing there, just a blank wall and an old cabinet. But every night, right at 3 a.m., he would stand there, never taking his eyes off it. Once, Mark woke up to the barking, opened the door, and saw Bruno with his ears erect, growling quietly as if someone was standing in front of him. But the hallway was empty. No alarm, no movement. Only thick darkness and a strange chill creeping through the air. What was even stranger was that Bruno never barked during the day. When daylight came, he was his usual gentle self, following Emma around, lying outside in the yard, wagging his tail whenever someone called his name. Julia began to lose sleep. She often woke up at 3 a.m., even without an alarm. She had recurring strange dreams, the dark hallway, the door slowly opening, and Bruno barking in despair. Mark, still trying to stay rational, began to feel that something was wrong. He said to his wife, "If this happens again tomorrow night, I'll install a camera. Not because I believe something's going on, just to prove to you that it's all in your head." Julia didn't respond. She just tightened her grip on Mark's hand and turned toward the hallway, where Bruno was still standing. His bright brown eyes seemed to be trying to say something that humans couldn't understand. But the night after, and the nights that followed, what truly made them shiver wasn't the barking. It was what the camera recorded. Mark installed the security camera that very night. A small, modern device, discreetly mounted in the corner of the living room ceiling, facing the hallway where Bruno often stood growling. He set it to record at night, connected to his phone so he could check any time. Julia didn't say anything as she watched him set it up. She quietly made another cup of tea and lightly touched Bruno's collar, almost as if seeking some comfort. That night, they went to bed earlier than usual. Julia closed the bedroom door just slightly, as if she wanted to leave a small crack. So, if Bruno barked at 3 a.m., she would hear it more clearly. And just like the ticking of a cursed clock, 03 at a.m., the barking rang out, this time more intense. Bruno barked 3 times decisively, then switched to growling continuously as if warning someone was trespassing. Julia jumped up. Mark immediately opened the camera app on his phone. They stared at the screen in the dim light. The infrared lights clearly revealed the hallway, the old wooden cabinet, the wall painting, and Bruno, standing, body rigid, eyes fixed on a vacant space. "There's nothing there," Mark muttered. But as soon as he finished speaking, a strange movement appeared. A shadow, shapeless, drifted across the left corner of the frame. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a cat. It wasn't anything tangible. Just a dark smear, like a thin mist rising from the ground and dissipating into the air. Mark gasped, "What the hell is that?" Julia clamped her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide open. She quickly rewound the camera footage a few seconds, and this time they saw it more clearly. That black streak moved up from beneath the stairs. When it appeared, Bruno started barking. But when it disappeared, the dog fell silent and stepped back 2 paces. Bruno was scared, a sight this family had never seen before. Unable to believe his eyes, Mark decided to check directly. He grabbed a flashlight and walked downstairs. Julia followed, her heart pounding in her chest. Bruno stopped on the stairs, not daring to move further. The house was silent. The hallway was freezing, as if a draft had blown through, though all the windows were shut tight. Mark scanned the area with the flashlight. No signs, no sounds, no cracks in the walls. Just a strange, thin trail of moisture on the floor, as if someone had walked through with cold, bare feet. That whole night, Julia couldn't sleep. She sat by her daughter's side, keeping watch as if it was an instinctive reflex. As for Mark, for the first time in many years, he admitted that something unexplainable was happening in the house they called home. But that was just the beginning. Because the night after, when they rechecked the camera, the shadow didn't just glide by. It stopped and turned to look straight at the lens. After discovering the strange shadow on the camera the first night, Mark decided to install 2 more cameras, one in the master bedroom and one in his daughter Emma's room. He told himself it was just to feel more secure. But deep down, Mark began to feel that the abnormal was no longer a joke. In the days that followed, Emma, the usually cheerful, active 6-year-old, began to grow quiet, jumpy, and talk in her sleep. At first, it was just unclear mumbling, but then Julia started hearing fragmented sentences in the middle of the night. "Bruno, don't bark anymore. He hasn't gone anywhere. Don't let him in. The door's not locked. Bruno, don't let him up." The first time she heard it, Julia thought it was just a dream. The second time, she felt a chill down her spine. And by the third time, when Emma suddenly sat up, eyes still closed, but her face full of panic, repeating one sentence over and over, "He's not here, but I see him." Julia could barely breathe. She hugged her daughter, whispering soothing words. But Emma continued to tremble in her sleep. But it wasn't just Emma. Julia also began to feel different. She often woke up at precisely 3 a.m., not because of Bruno, but because of a cold air that had no obvious source. It slid through the cracks in her clothes, seeping into her spine and making her shiver despite the heater running normally. She thought maybe it was just her sensitivity, but when she checked the room temperature, the thermometer still read 26°. No windows were open, no drafts were blowing, and Mark, he was sleeping soundly, as if everything was perfectly normal. Julia began to look haggard. dark circles under her eyes, constantly sleep-deprived. She said to her husband, "I don't think it's just exhaustion or imagination. Something is really wrong." Mark sighed, pulling his wife into his arms. "I know, but if we let fear take over, we won't have any reason left." So, to prove that everything was fine, Mark installed an infrared camera system, automatically connected to iCloud and their phones. He also installed an AI motion detection software, a way he believed would solve their sleepless nights. And then, that night, Mark had a video that, to this day, he wishes he had never watched. 2:03 a.m. While the entire house was plunged into silence, the security system Mark had just installed began recording a series of images that left viewers holding their breath. Bruno, the normally docile dog, wasn't lying in the master bedroom as usual. He was sitting in the hallway, his eyes fixed on the stairs leading to the second floor. His head was tilted slightly, ears perked up, and his whole body was tense, as if guarding something invisible. From the infrared camera's perspective in the living room, at exactly 03:02 a.m., a faint light flickered from the large glass window in the back, where the snow-covered garden lay. No sound, no wind, but the image clearly showed a shadow gliding past the window. The movement didn't resemble a normal human step. It slid as if not touching the ground, just a tall, thin, dark shape. Faceless, but standing like a human in an eerie way. Bruno growled. Not a loud bark, just a low growl emanating from his chest, full of defensive instinct. He stood up suddenly, staring at the space in the hallway, and at that moment, the camera on the second floor changed its frame. At the end of the hallway leading to Emma's room, the blurry image appeared again. No lights, no doors open. But that dark shadow quietly moved toward the little girl's room. When Mark watched this footage the next morning, he couldn't breathe for a few seconds. He had to pause the tape, rewind it, and then watch it in slow motion. But nothing changed. No distortion, no lens error. Every detail was precise, except for that entity. At 03:04, Bruno barked loudly, 3 sharp, rapid barks, and the frightening thing was, the shadow immediately stopped, turned and vanished toward the stairs as if being chased away. No door opened, no footsteps, only a cold house and a little girl gasping in her sleep, whispering, "Bruno chased him away, but he'll come back." Mark turned off the screen. His whole body shook, not from the cold, but from an invisible fear, creeping like thin smoke through what should have been the safest of places, his own home. He knew he couldn't ignore it any longer. Bruno, the dog they once thought was just barking for no reason, had likely seen something humans couldn't. And that was just the beginning. The next morning, the house seemed to be enveloped in a heavy silence. Julia sat at the kitchen table, holding a cup of coffee but unable to drink it. Her eyes were still red from a sleepless night, and Mark sat in quiet contemplation, repeatedly rewinding the camera footage, as if searching for something to explain it logically. But everything was too clear, too abnormal. Bruno lay beside Emma's feet, still fixated on the wooden stairs leading down to the old basement, a place they had never entered since moving in. Julia suddenly remembered Mrs. Harris, the elderly neighbor who lived 2 houses down. She'd been in the neighborhood for over 40 years. If anyone knew of something strange that had happened here, it was definitely her. Without hesitation, Julia took the USB drive containing the video to Mrs. Harris's house, her palms sweating with nervousness. The door opened, and a faint scent of mint wafted from inside. Mrs. Harris stood there, her silver hair neatly tied back, her gentle gaze instantly recognizing the fear in Julia. "Is something wrong, dear?" Julia didn't hesitate. She held out the USB drive. "Could you please watch this video? Something extraordinary happened at our house last night." Mrs. Harris nodded, leading Julia into the living room, where she plugged the USB into the TV. As the video began to play, the image of Bruno sitting motionless at 3 a.m. appeared on the screen, followed by the shadowy figure. Mrs. Harris seemed to hold her breath. When the shadow moved toward Emma's room, she instinctively raised her hand to her mouth. When the video ended, the living room fell into a terrifying silence. It wasn't until a moment later that Mrs. Harris spoke softly, as if weighing whether or not she should say something. "Before you bought the house, it had been abandoned for nearly a year." Julia frowned. "I thought the previous owners moved because they were going abroad for work." Mrs. Harris shook her head. "They moved because they couldn't stand the strange occurrences. But that wasn't the beginning." Then she spoke, her voice steady as if recalling a forbidden tale that the entire neighborhood had silently forgotten. "Before, this house belonged to a man who lived alone. No one knew much about him except that he was very quiet, never turned on the lights, and almost never appeared during the day. People suspected, but no one dared to interfere." Julia swallowed hard. One time, the neighbors noticed signs of someone sneaking up to the second floor every night. Footsteps, whispering, but no one could catch them, and then he disappeared. The police came and searched the basement. Nobody, no clues, but there was something they found: a small wooden chair, ropes, a stack of tattered magazines, and strange scratch marks on the basement ceiling, as if someone had lived down there for a long time. Mrs. Harris paused, her gaze locking onto Julia's. "After that, people said his spirit still lingers around. No one dared to stay long in that house. Every new owner left, and you're the first to stay this long." Julia felt a chill run down her spine. She gripped her hands tightly, thanked Mrs. Harris, and hurried back. When she arrived home, she found Bruno still guarding the basement stairs. Mark was standing by the door, his face serious. "I tried to open the basement door, but the doorknob was stuck like someone locked it from the inside. But clearly, there's no one else in the house." Julia looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "We need to know who or what is living in this house with us." Unable to live with the doubt and fear that overshadowed every night, Mark decided to take action, officially and thoroughly. He called the police, along with a team of civilian security experts specialized in handling unexplained situations. This service could only be hired by private recommendation at a high cost, but for Julia, the safety of Emma and their family was more important than anything else. The next morning, when the black, unmarked car stopped in front of the yard, two men in dark gray uniforms stepped out, carrying infrastructure wave recording devices, thermal cameras, motion detectors, and a biological heat measuring device. They introduced themselves simply, "We are the Special Investigation Support Team. Call us when you feel that the house, something is wrong." Mark led them inside, where Julia was tightly holding Emma in her arms. Bruno lay with his muzzle resting on the basement door, his eyes never leaving the rusty lock, still as if waiting for something to be opened. One of the two men, the taller one named Davis, bent down, stared at Bruno for a long time, then said quietly, "Dogs sometimes sense things that humans overlook, and sometimes they are the first warning. The air in the house grew colder than usual, even though the fireplace was still burning brightly." The investigation began. Davis and his partner walked through all the floors, using equipment to detect temperature abnormalities in the walls, under the floor, and near the areas where Bruno often reacted in the middle of the night. Everything seemed normal, until they reached the garage, which was rarely used. In a dark corner near an old wooden shelf, Davis stopped. On the floor, almost covered by a thick layer of dust, was a round indentation as if there were a hollow space beneath. He tapped lightly with a hammer. The sound echoed, hollow and deep. "There's an empty cavity here. It's definitely a space underneath." After a few minutes of searching, they found a loose floorboard. Davis and his partner pried it up, revealing a narrow passageway, like a tunnel that had been hand-dug. A cold, musty air rushed up from below, making Julia shiver. There was a smell, pungent, like rust, damp earth, and something older. The group, equipped with headlamps and handheld cameras, slowly made their way down. The tunnel was only wide enough for a person to crouch and crawl through, extending about 10 meters, leading directly to a hollow space under the main floor of the house, right beneath the laundry room, adjacent to the hallway where Bruno usually growled at 3 a.m. Under the dim yellow light, they made their first discovery. Footprints. Not many, but clear. Dry mud mixed with dust left behind by adult-sized footsteps. Fresh. It couldn't have been from the previous owners. "No one's been down here for a year, right?" Davis asked. Mark nodded, his face pale. "We didn't even know this tunnel existed." They continued further. One corner of the tunnel was reinforced with old wood and bricks. Hanging from it was a rusted iron hook with a tattered 2-meter-long cloth rope. Had someone tied something here? Or worse, had someone been held here? Suddenly, the biological heat meter emitted a short beep. Davis looked down at the screen. A small orange dot was moving gently. A live heat source, less than 2 meters away from them. "It could be a rat," his partner said, his voice trembling. But Davis shook his head, his eyes never leaving the screen. "No, the object is too large, and it's standing still, waiting." They shone their lights, but saw nothing but the stone wall. Suddenly, the orange dot disappeared from the radar. A few seconds later, upstairs, Bruno's barking erupted frantically. The group rushed back upstairs, hearts pounding. Bruno was scratching furiously at the wall of the utility room, right below where the newly discovered tunnel lay. Julia screamed when she saw the utility room door wide open, even though she had locked it tightly herself that morning. Davis pointed the heat meter toward the corner of the room. The device immediately began beeping incessantly. Something had been standing here, very close, just minutes ago. That night, no one in the family could sleep. Bruno remained at the end of the hallway, his eyes wide open, staring toward the stairs. In the dim light, his eyes reflected the infrared camera's beam, not aggressive, but sharp as a blade. The special security team decided to stay and set a trap. A thermal camera was placed in the utility room. One person was positioned in the garage. A motion detection device was directly connected to the monitoring screen placed in the living room. The family huddled together. Emma had fallen asleep on the sofa, her head resting on her mother's shoulder, covered by a thin blanket. Mark kept his eyes fixed on the screen. Then, 2:58 a.m., a slight sound rang out, click, like a lock being gently turned. Bruno sprang up. His ears stood straight. He growled softly. The infrared camera began recording movement. 03 a.m. A short, dark figure wearing a dark cloak appeared in the corner of the camera near the basement door. It moved quietly, as if it was familiar with every door, every step of the stairs. But this time, it was not alone. Bruno charged. No growl, no hesitation. The dog shot like a black arrow through the darkness. The barking erupted, fierce, determined, and full of anger. Just seconds later, the sound of running footsteps and the crashing of objects could be heard from the basement. Davis, a member of the security team, immediately switched on his flashlight and signaled to the ambushers. They rushed toward the discovery point, with Bruno leading the way. In the garage, they subdued a man, attempting to crawl back into the small tunnel. The light shone on his face. A scruffy beard, bloodshot eyes, and mumbling incomprehensible words. Davis immediately handcuffed him, reading aloud the temporary detention terms. At the same time, their facial recognition system signaled matched, wanted suspect, trespassing, stalking, mental instability. He was a fugitive from another state who had broken into several houses in the mountainous region to find a safe place to hide, according to fragmented testimony in the records. The drifter had been hiding through the old tunnel and had approached Emma's room multiple times at 3 a.m. The following morning, after everything was checked and the police confirmed the information, Julia hugged Bruno tightly, unable to hold back her tears. If it weren't for you, Emma would have been in danger. We would have never known what was really happening. Mark sat down beside her, gently patting the dog's back. You're not just a pet. You're the hero of this family. Emma woke up, rubbed her eyes, and seeing everyone sitting around Bruno, she ran to hug its neck. She whispered something into its ear. Only Bruno could hear, and then giggled softly. Bruno licked her cheek, wagging its tail gently. From a dog adopted among dozens of others at the rescue shelter, Bruno became a symbol of loyalty, protective instincts, and a living testament that there are guardian angels without wings, but with brown fur, bright eyes, and a heart that never leaves the one it loves. 2 weeks after that fateful night, the small house on Maple Street returned to peace. No more barking at 3 a.m., no more strange dreams, or Julia's worried gaze in the middle of the night. Bruno still slept in the hallway, right in its old spot, like a loyal soldier guarding the post. But this time, it wasn't guarding a shadow lurking in the night, just the routine of a hero who had completed his mission. Julia sat in the living room, with the early sunlight streaming through the window. She placed her laptop on her lap, typing each line into her blog, where she usually wrote small stories about her family, about Emma, and now, about Bruno. I used to think having a dog was just for companionship, but now I understand. There are times when that very companion becomes the only protector in the dark of night. If it weren't for Bruno, I don't know what would have happened to my daughter. It wasn't the cameras. It wasn't the locks. It was the pure love and instinct of a creature who silently watches over us that saved our entire family. Sometimes, what protects you isn't technology, but a loyal heart, one that knows when you're in danger. And the most miraculous thing is That dog didn't need to say a single word. The post quickly went viral. Thousands of shares and hundreds of emotional comments. Some said they would install more security systems. Others said they would pay more attention to their pet's behavior. And many hugged their dogs tightly after reading the story. As for Mark's family, they didn't just add motion sensors, heat sensors, and cameras in every possible area. They also designed a warm space for Bruno right by the fireplace, with soft rugs, toys, and a small sign hanging above it. Bruno, our silent guardian, our gentle hero. Emma drew a picture for Bruno, where he stood proudly like a four-legged knight in front of the house under the night sky, with the entire family peacefully sleeping inside. From then on, whenever someone asked about Bruno, Julia would just smile and say, "He's not just a dog. He's the reason I still get to see my daughter smile every morning." Sometimes, heroes don't wear capes. They don't roar, don't fight under shimmering lights. They simply bark at 3 a.m. because they sense what humans can't. And sometimes, an ear standing up, a tail wagging gently, is the line between safety and tragedy. If you have a dog at home, hug it tight tonight, because you'll never know how many times it's silently protected you. Share your story in the comments below. We'd love to hear it from you. Don't forget, hit like if the story touched your heart. Subscribe so you don't miss the following emotional stories, and share this video with someone who needs a reason to believe that true love always knows how to protect.